Good afternoon. Welcome to Fierce Faith, Embodied Grace. I'm Kate Shipp, Christ-centered yoga therapist specializing in trauma recovery and mental health. If you're joining me today, let me know that you're here. Say hello, jump on, say hi. I'm going to give it a moment as people come in. Today's topic, we are discussing the perceptions and stories that we create about our experience of life and how the interpretations of those experiences affect our day-to-day living. So this topic came up over the past few days with clients and in my personal life with my daughter, and just thought it would be something really interesting to dive into for a short time here. So it'll be a little bit shorter offering today, just about 30 minutes. So say hi when you jump in. Hi, Cindy. Thanks for being here. I'm streaming via StreamYard. So if you've registered with them, your name will pop up. If you haven't registered with them, it will show up as Facebook user. So just let me know who you are. Just say, this is so-and-so. Hi, if you're not registered with StreamYard. So we're going to give it another moment. If you're here, say hello. This is streaming on my Facebook page, a group, and my YouTube channel, which is Kate Shipp. So you can check that there. Hi, Brianna. Thanks for being here. So let me know you're here, you guys. If you end up watching this back on replay, type in replay. I would love to hear any insights, awarenesses that you gain through watching this. So I'm going to start jumping in as people are jumping on. Hello there. I see some people are joining. Thank you for being here today. We're talking today about our perception and the stories that we create about our experiences in life and how that then facilitates how we're living. So something that shows up recently with a lot of people and in my own life is the perception of other people's experiences. So this has been an interesting thing to watch it unfold this past week. And there was situations with clients where they were told things about their energy, or I'm noticing that you seem sad. I'm noticing, this is things that were said to them. I'm noticing that you seem upset. Are you angry? Are you sad? Like, what's going on with you? And then this also showed up in my personal life with me projecting some stuff onto my daughter around, well, why are you so afraid about this? And so the common theme here on this is other people making assumptions and perceptions on someone else's experience and how that actually creates a lot of tension and stress in relationships. So the tendency that people have is they experience something, whether that something is a situation or someone else's energy, and then they create a story about that. So their story may be this person's angry, or this person's afraid, or that situation was unhealthy. And really what's happening is there's a tendency of our ego self to project onto another what we're uncomfortable with. So instead of asking what's happening for you right now, we start assuming. So one of the mistakes that's made in healthy communication in relationships is there's a tendency that people start assuming, I know what you're feeling. I can tell you're sad. Instead of asking a simple question, what are you experiencing right now? What's happening for you? I'm noticing that you're not doing the things you normally do that help you feel really good. So what's going on? How can I be of best support? How can I help you? And so there's this energetic conflict that starts occurring between someone else's experience and your interpretation of that experience. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more in just a moment. Hi, Helen. Thanks for being here. So if you've jumped on, let me know that you're here. Hello, say hi. We're going to dive a little bit further into this awareness of, is it truth or is it my perception? Is it my stuff or their stuff? Am I creating a story about someone else's experience because I'm not looking at myself? So there's often this tendency that happens is people are less likely to turn inward and self-reflect, and they're more likely to turn outward and project. right? So turning inward and self-reflecting is where we have control. Turning outward and projecting is where we have no control. But there is a tendency to project outward that which we are uncomfortable reflecting inward on. So noticing that for yourself, do you have a tendency to project outward on someone else's experience what you're uncomfortable looking inward at for yourself? Hi, Susie. Thanks for being here. And it's not a conscious thing. This isn't a intentional pattern. I don't believe it's intentional that people do this. I don't believe there's this intentional thought that says I'm going to project this onto them because I'm uncomfortable looking at myself. It's not that way, but it tends to be a pattern in people's lives that causes a lot of suffering, and it can cause a lot of conflict in relationships. So I'm going to give you an example of how this happened, because I think we learn through story really well. And I believe that we can experience resolution within ourselves when we sometimes hear other people's stories and experience. So I'm taking my daughter to a water park with her friends later today. And this is her first time going, my first time going. And she was having some, what I perceived as fear of going to the water park, to the point of where she had wanted to cancel going. And I'm like, what is going on for her? This is not like, she was so excited to go. We made these plans, arranged it with her girlfriends and their parents and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden it was like a stop. Cancel it. I don't want to go. All this stuff. I'm like, okay. So I projected. I said, why are you afraid of going to the water park? My projection onto her, because I wasn't looking at why am I uncomfortable with her wanting to change her mind? Why am I uncomfortable with her not wanting to go anymore? And I will get to that. And she got so upset with me. And she said, I'm not scared to go to the water park. Why can't you just get that through your head? She knows this languaging. She goes, why are you projecting on me? She's like, I didn't say anything about being afraid of going to the water park. She said, I just don't want to go anymore. And I kind of pulled back and thought, wow, she's really emotional about this right now. What is really going on? This is the tendency that people have, right? There's a projection. It's not the right assumption. And so now there's this conflict. And so I sat there and I listened to her, and there were tears at this point. And I created a story that said, well, I can't cancel on these people because their parents have already paid for the tickets, right? I've already paid for our tickets. If I cancel, then we'd have to pay them back and have to explain why we're not going to the water park and why we did. I went into a huge story about why she's not allowed to change her mind, which is definitely not in alignment with how our family lives their life. People can change their mind when they want. That doesn't mean we don't follow through on commitments that we make. And we evaluate why we're changing our mind. So what I noticed for myself was I had gotten into this spiral of, oh my gosh, what are these other people going to think if I now say we're not going to the water park, and their perception on me and my daughter because of that, right? So this is the perception and story that I was talking about in the title of this talk today. So what it really came down to was something a little bit more personal for my daughter that I'm not going to share, that she and I and her dad and her worked through. So now she's very excited to go to the water park again. I made the assumption that it was fear of going to the water park. It had nothing to do with that. It was something completely different that was then being given the context of this experience of the water park that then I made an assumption of and projected onto her, which created a conflict for she and I. So instead, a healthier way to approach that situation is to say to someone that you're allowed to feel how you feel. I hear that you're saying you don't want to go to the water park anymore. Can you help me understand why you changed your mind? Now I'm not projecting fear of saying, why are you afraid of going to the water park? Now I'm giving her space and saying, help me understand why you've decided to change your mind on this. I'm removing my context of story that says, oh gosh, these other parents are going to be really annoyed that they spent this money and now their child's not going. And so that was my stuff. That was my ego stuff that needed to be set aside. And now there's space for she and I to have a healthy conversation around the situation that removes the emotion. I projected emotion. She just said, I don't want to go anymore. I'm the one that put fear in the way. So I name this because this is what happens in relationships all the time. We perceive something, we create a story about what we're perceiving, and then unless we have this really clear conscious awareness, we tend to project that story onto someone else. I want to pause for a moment. And if you're with me here, let me know you're here. Say hello. If you just listened to that story of that experience of this perception, story, interpretation, right, and how that affected a relational conflict. And I'm curious for you of if that relates to how you notice people show up for you or how you show up for others. Susie said, yep, thank you for being vulnerable, Susie. I appreciate that. This is how we learn and grow. We have to be able okay, what's my tendency here? Do I have a tendency to project? Do I have a tendency to create a story, an inner narrative that then changes my experience of that situation? Okay. And this is so powerful because then we can change it, right? Then, my daughter, what it really created in the situation, she at one point started yelling at me and I allowed her to vent, to share. And later she came to apologize for treating me that way. And I said, you had every right to feel how you felt. I projected a story onto your experience that wasn't true because I was more comfortable with you being afraid. That way we could have an out for not going. We are going. We're leaving soon. But it created this beautiful kind of rub between the two of us that we could dig in because we have that relational ability to do so. What is this really about? And I've learned for myself that I need to not project what I think she's experiencing. And people tend to do this in their closest relationships more than anything else. So I want to read Jill. Yes, my recent shadow work has illuminated the need to ask myself the very questions that I feel concerned about, defensive about in the other. Beautiful. I've been meditating on this and turning compassion inward. It's been amazingly healing. I love that. My biggest resistance seems to lie in the conditioning of guilt and shame that turns me away from being selfish, which is actually a desire for love, self-love. Yes, it is. Does that make any sense? Absolutely. So when we are conditioned for guilt and shame, if we take care of ourselves first and are self-compassionate, then those old patterns are going to get activated and triggered. So children, if this was a childhood pattern that's been presenting itself for a long time, children will take on the belief that they must have done something wrong or they must be wrong to be able to receive the love that they need. Meaning when a parent is mad at a child, the child very rarely is going to blame the parent and will most often blame themselves. So the self-love and the love that they need it now becomes conditional. I'm only going to receive the love that I need if I show up this way. So as you become an adult and you're working through these things, you start realizing, oh my gosh, my tendency to feel guilt and shame was actually an act of love for myself. If I take on the guilt and shame that another is projecting, I was more likely to receive love. So now the turnaround on that is I need to love myself and be compassionate to me first, more than I am concerned with how other people perceive me. Right? Beautiful, Jill. It sounds like you're doing some really good work there. I love that. Susie, working on boundaries. Yesterday, because of events, understood, I was prevented from anticipating needs. It was beautiful. It gave space for others in the household to voice their true needs. So much better. Well, I love that you were able to take a situation, it sounds like, and work through it together. And it presented a way for other people to share what they needed. So I love how when we are present, when we are using the right tools at the right time, or at least trying to use some tools, it often can reveal a beautiful unfolding, maybe even healing for some people. So I want to share another story about this because I think you guys are understanding this context and framework is when this is what has showed up with a bunch of clients over a period of time. So there's a theme that I'm noticing. And the theme was another person saying to them how they're experiencing their energy. So this would show up as a friend saying to someone, I noticed that you're having a really hard time lately. Pretty bold statement, and honestly, kind of intrusive, right? So I noticed that you're having a really hard time lately. And you could imagine in the context of relationship that conversation could go one of two ways. So being generous and loving, one would say, okay, this person is actually saying that they care about me and they're concerned that they sense that something is off. The other side of that could become extremely defensive and very much like, well, what are you talking about? I'm fine. So there's a teeter-totter way that this tends to go. So when someone says, I notice that you're having a hard time lately, being able to pull back in and own your energy and decide, how do I want to respond to that situation? Here's the brilliant statement. Help me understand why you say that. That's all you have to say. Help me understand why you say that. Because there's a reason why someone is saying that to you, right? In these situations, the situations that had unfolded, some of it was more the person genuinely cared and they had noticed that someone was going through a hard time. In other situations, it was more of control and manipulation. But if you cut that statement by saying, help me understand what you mean by that. So if someone were to say to you, I notice that you're having a hard time, or I notice that you're sad a lot lately, or I notice that you're not the same person that you were the last time I saw you. And to be able to say, help me understand why you say that. Then the ball's in their court and they have to justify why they're projecting their perception on you. Because what they're really saying is, I am perceiving that you are not showing up the way I want you or expect you to. So their perception being projected on you about your internal experience that's happening, but they didn't even ask what your internal experience was. Am I making sense in this? Susie's saying, I love the phrase, help me understand. It's a beautiful clarifying phrase, right? It gives someone space to continue what they're saying. But do you understand what I mean when I'm saying that someone's saying to you anything like, I notice that you're having a really hard time, is their projection of you, their perception of you. Okay, Jill's saying perfect. Okay, next stage of that, you say, help me understand why you're saying that. They reply. Right? Maybe their reply has to do with something they've noticed in your text messages back and forth to each other. Or maybe it has to do with, maybe you're not engaging the way that you used to. Or maybe your face is showing. I'm someone where my face shows a lot. So maybe your face is showing that you're having an emotional space. Here's the kicker on this, you guys. And this is where some people's edges. Emotions are not bad. So even if someone is having an emotional experience and doesn't mean they're not okay, but the perception that you have based on your experience with those emotions will cause a projection onto others, right? The perception that you have of those emotions based on your experience of them will cause a projection onto others. So when someone is in an emotional space that you're uncomfortable with, the tendency is that you will project that something's wrong with them. Right? There's nothing wrong with them. They're having an emotional experience of any kind. And you're receiving their energy. And instead of going inward and saying, what am I experiencing in relation to how they're showing up? Majority of people aren't in that consciousness yet. So to be able to say, what am I experiencing because of how they're showing up, would be self-reflective. Instead, the tendency is, what's going on? What's wrong with you? Horrible question to say to someone. Horrible. Please take that out of your vocabulary, right? Stop saying to someone, what's wrong with you? Always, especially your kids. Because what's wrong? What's going on? That immediately says that how they're feeling is not okay. Instead of validating the experience they're having. So the perceptions that you have are about your own stuff. And to end it there for yourself, to say, what am I experiencing because of how they're showing up? Right? If you're going to go have lunch with one of your best friends and you're so excited to go have lunch with this person, and then you show up and they're there and their energy is a little solemn. Maybe they're a little like rounded in their body language and they're not as smiley and bubbly as they used to. Notice if your tendency is to say, what's wrong? What's going on? Your perception of their experience. Instead of, hey, how's it going? Let them explain what's happening for them, right? And noticing, what is this about for you? Here's the way that this happened to me. So I woke up one morning, this was a few weeks ago, and I was feeling some grief. And the grief was valid. It always is valid. But in that situation, it was valid because it was the end of something really powerful that had happened in my life. And so I was grieving the end of this beauty that had just taken place. And it wasn't like the beauty was over, but it was coming to an end point, one part of it. And so I was around some other important people in my life. And one of the people said to me, are you okay? You're not the same Kate that I talked with last night. And I sat there, I was drinking my coffee, and I sat there contemplating that. And I thought to myself, that is such an interesting statement. You're not the same Kate that I talked to last night. And I thought, no, I'm not, because I'm experiencing grief. And so I said to this person, I'm experiencing grief right now. This beautiful thing is ending, and it's a huge celebration, but grief is a natural process. And I'm just letting myself feel the grief. And I said to her, are you uncomfortable with someone being in grief? Blank. That was what that really was. She was feeling my grief, my change in energy. She was uncomfortable with someone being in grief. So she thought something was wrong with me. Nothing was wrong with me. I've learned to have a beautiful relationship with grief. Right? I allow myself to grieve, and I allow it to be a very fluid process. When it comes, the wave comes, I let it move, it goes. The problem became someone else's interpretation of my experience as if grief was bad, as if it wasn't okay to be grieving. So the perception based on her prior experiences with grief was projected, right, onto my experience. Had nothing to do with me. And, we've had a lot of healthy dialogue around this, because what we are unwilling to look at within ourselves will be what bothers us in another. That's the mirroring piece. It's not someone has this, so I have this. It's what we are unwilling to look at within ourselves will be what bothers us in another person. And we will project it as if that person is wrong or a problem, or they need to show up differently because I'm uncomfortable with it. So take that in for a moment. I know we've gone deep pretty quick, and that's what I tend to do. But I want to honor that there's a lot that I'm giving in the space right now. Right, Susie, I'm running into more people that are able to identify they're out of body. What a gift. What a gift that they're able to identify that they're out of the body. That's amazing. This is awesome. Yes, but I don't have a quick way to help them with this. Any suggestion? This is occurring short conversations. No ability to create more time or space to discuss. So the moment someone's aware they're out of body is the moment they can come back in. So the fastest way to get someone back in their body, right? I'm going to give you 3 ways. right? Say their name, because we identify our body with our name. You say their name. You ask them to place their hand somewhere on their body, right? That's appropriate for the situation. So you say their name, have them place some awareness on their body, right? So maybe it's on their heart, right? Maybe it's on their face. Maybe it's they're hugging themselves, right? Maybe their hands are on their thighs, right? And then you have them take 5 breaths. It's that simple to bring someone back in. However, whether they stay in is another story, because a lot of times people are aware they're out of their body, but then the moment they come in, they jump back out because feeling in their body is scary. So their name, body sensation awareness, hand on part of the body, right? And 5 intentional breaths. That's going to help them land. Like, it's going to touch them down. Sometimes they're going to skyrocket back out. And that just means they need to titrate their ability to stay in their body. Right? So Susie, hopefully that helps really, really quick. Okay. I used to hang out with a gal that would say this to me many times when I would see her, and it drove me nuts as I was good. However, now looking back on it, I think she was picking up on negative vibes I had about her. And to be honest, I really didn't like her, but it took me a while to see this. I haven't seen her in a few years. She's just not my people, as the saying goes. So I love the honoring of, you were unaware of what was happening for you. She was aware of something in your energy that wasn't aligning with hers. And so it would agitate you when she would say this. That is rather annoying, right? It is rather annoying when someone constantly pushes and says, well, what's going on? I know something's wrong. I can tell. Oftentimes what that really is that person may be accurate, but the person they're saying it to may not have the awareness yet, or the ability to sense for themselves, because maybe there's been other experiences where their wants and needs were unmet. So what they actually desire for themselves doesn't seem valid or important. And so then it can become really agitating when someone says, well, what's going on? You're not okay. What's happening? What's wrong with you? Instead of owning, I'm experiencing something because of their energy. And what is happening for me in that? That was where her power lied. Okay. And absolutely, when you notice that people aren't right for you, then allowing yourself that space, if it's valid, to remove them from your life, or adjusting how you show up in it. All right, Susie, I have a lot more introspection, trying to track my own experience, where it's coming from. Yeah, that's where our power lies. What's happening for me in this? How do I want to show up in this? Yes, the rest is going to require time. Absolutely. Facebook user, I'm not sure who this is. So say, if you would give me your name, I would love it. Because I'm streaming on StreamYard, it just calls you Facebook user instead of giving you a name. So if you want to just sign it with your name after, that's always helpful. I've been grieving and under stress the past 6 months. I've had a few spiritual people tell me I better get my head into a more positive space, or I would manifest illness and negativity, but I need to feel my way through the grief. I'm doing what I can through essential oils, Reiki, etc., but I almost feel like it's not okay to feel this. So while I'm not going to be giving any medical advice on these things, I'm not a medical provider, here's what I will say. Every feeling, every emotion that you have is valid. So if you have been grieving and under stress the past 6 months, you are allowed to grieve for as long as you need to grieve until the grief wave has passed. And here's the thing with grief. There's no timeline. Grief is like this really messy spiral of energy, okay? And the energy of the grief is necessary for your nervous system to work out whatever it's trying to work out. And when people tell someone how they need to be, that's because they are uncomfortable or worried about you being the way you are. So that's that projection, right? I need to get my head into a more positive space. I'm going to manifest illness and negative. That's called spiritual bypassing, right? Really unhealthy, really invalidating to the experience that you're having, and actually could make you experience even more grief because you're not being held with compassion and empathy. So compassion and empathy would say, I'm so sorry that you're having this experience. I'm so sorry that you're having a hard time finding your way through the grief. How can I best support you? What would be helpful? Maybe you just need to be held and let someone hold you physically, energetically, while you allow the grief to move. Maybe it's learning to be with grief in a new way. Grief has a lot of growth on the other side of it, right? Grieving is actually one of the greatest growth transmitters. If we allow our full being, physical, energy, mental, emotional, spiritual bodies to process the energy of the grief. What tends to happen with grief is people want it to leave fast. They don't like the feeling, the body sensation of grieving. It is, for me, the hardest emotion still to feel. I've learned to be with it in a new way. Took a long time and a lot of grief to have that, okay? And recognizing that when we are in grief, when another is in grief, if you have an unhealthy relationship to the emotion of grief, it's going to be really hard for you to be with someone who's grieving. That doesn't mean something's wrong with you. That doesn't mean something's wrong with them. It simply means that grief is hard. And naming it as that, grief is really difficult to feel. And the best way to walk through grief is one tiny little step at a time. And giving yourself loving, supportive community that encourages you, that inspires you, that holds you, instead of telling you you should be feeling different by now, right? Hi, Karen. Okay, thank you. Susie, off topic, but must say loved your post this morning. So powerful. I am unsure what post you're talking about, but I thank you. I don't know which one that's referencing. So to wrap things up today, just to kind of summarize these situations, if you find yourself in the situation where someone is saying, you know, what's wrong with you? What's going on? I can tell you're having a hard time. I want you to simply invite that interrupting statement that says, help me understand why you're saying that. That will help soothe the situation so you don't react, and so they can start looking at, why am I saying that? Why am I telling someone that I think they're having a hard time? Or why am I telling someone that I think something's wrong with them? Or why are they saying that to me? I'm totally fine. Why are they saying that you need to be different than you are? That's about them. And it's not, that's about you. Right? It's, thank you so much for caring, right? Thank you so much for reaching out. I appreciate you. I know that this is coming from a place of love. Help me understand why you're saying what you're saying. I'm actually okay, right? In some of these other situations that I was referencing from past experiences with clients, really what came down to it for them was the person that had projected upon them wasn't willing to own their part in the experience. So some of those relationships had to fizzle out for them. But if you can remember this, the moment you start to wonder if something is wrong with someone else, start with yourself first. How am I experiencing them? What is this about for me? And how can I show up for them with compassion, empathy, and love instead of projecting my story or interpretation of their experience onto them? Powerful changes will start happening in your relationships when you start approaching things like that in that healthy way. What's happening for me? How am I experiencing them? You know, what's going on for me in this? How can I show up with compassion, empathy, and love instead of projecting my perceptions, my interpretation and story on their experience? Okay. Karen, you are welcome. So blessed that you jumped on here as well. Oh, Susie, the one with Mary Magdalene and Jesus. Yes, that was a dream from a couple nights ago. I think you may have caught the post. Maybe it was, I don't remember when I posted it. If it was yesterday or the day before. But if you guys haven't seen the post I made on my dream where Jesus and Mary Magdalene appeared and had this amazing interaction that my cellular layer is still processing through, you may find that very inspiring. I very much know that wasn't just for me. That dream was for much more than just myself. So Jill, you are welcome. I appreciate each of you that has been on here today. Those that watch on replay, thank you so much. Wishing you all a beautifully blessed day. Take care.